Today's focus on understanding characterization is looking at when writers develop character through the things they think. The way the readers will get this information depends a lot on the narrative point of view. If the story is told in first person, the main character will usually explain their thoughts directly to the reader. Here is an example of first-person narration. This comes from The Burning Girl. You'd think it wouldn't bother me now. The Burnesses moved away long ago. 2 years have passed, but still, I can't lie in the sun on the boulders at the quarry's edge, or dangle my toes in the cold, clear water, or hear the other girls singing, without being aware the whole time that Cassie is gone. And then I want to say something, but you can't, you know. It's like she never existed. If the story is told in first person, you get a good understanding of what the character thinks, as long as the character is honest with themselves. So this is the kicker. We don't always have a reliable narrator. So remember her? We said she was metaphorically putting her hands over her eyes to avoid seeing things. If a first-person narrator is like this, they may think certain things that aren't true. For example, here is an example of a narrator not thinking exactly the truth. My eyes bore into the lumpy monster staring back from the mirror. What was she thinking, putting on that flannel under those overalls? An outfit better left to the pixie dream girls, those 5'2" beauties with bodies like planks. I forced myself to stare into her eyes. Pitiful. They're welling up. You are disgusting, I mouth at her. I flick off the lights and crawl under my covers, but the moonlight still illuminates the mirror, and I can't stop glancing into her tortured eyes. In this case, the narrator's insecurities about her body prevent her from seeing herself clearly, so the reader gets an unreliable source of information. Is there actually a lumpy monster in the mirror? No. What the narrator sees is not what is true. What about the things a first-person narrator tells you about others? Can you just accept everything they tell you about what other characters think? Of course not. Here's an example. I sauntered to the front of the line and opened the door, waving ironically at the herd of band geeks waiting their turn to get in. The jealousy on their faces was adorable. I could practically hear the inner monologues. What it must be like to be Heather Kahn, so sweet, so naive. In this case, the narrator's inflated ego causes her to think that everyone around her wants to be her. Is what Heather read on the band geeks' faces actually jealousy, or is that simply what she chooses to see? If the story is told in third person, the character's thoughts are shared by either an omniscient or limited narrator. So let's take a second to tell the difference between the two types of third-person narration. Omniscient third person is when the narrator is an all-knowing outside observer, so they know what every character is thinking and feeling. When you have a limited third-person narrator, the narrator is an outside observer who only has access to the thoughts and feelings of a particular character or group and doesn't have the rest of the information. So here's an example. Tamsin was determined to ignore all the negativity her friends were spewing at her. There was absolutely nothing wrong with Jeremy, unless, of course, loving her too fiercely was some sort of crime. He cared about her in a way that seemed to scare people, but Tamsin had decided those people had simply never experienced this kind of love. Here, a third-person narrator has access to Tamsin's thoughts and feelings. If this is a limited third-person narrator, the narrator can't give us the whole story because we only see Tamsin's perspective. We can't tell if she's lying to herself about Jeremy or if her friends are wrong about him. Here's another example. Jeremy was worried about Tamsin. He felt like she was pulling back, retreating into that shell he worked so hard to get her out of. It was her friends. He was almost sure they were poisoning her with their jealousy and stupidity. Not for long, he whispered with a smile. If the narrator is omniscient, we would get Jeremy's thoughts as well, giving us a better idea of what is happening in his mind too. In this case, we would see that Tamsin's friends are right and there is something scary about him. So sometimes a book will be narrated by multiple first-person narrators, which creates the same effect as a third-person omniscient narrator. The writer alternates chapters between different characters who tell the story from their point of view, so the readers get to see each person's thoughts, which is kind of cool, and you may have read a couple books like this already. This does not make one form of narration better or worse, it just makes it different. If the tale of Tamsin and Jeremy is told by a limited narrator, then the reader will be kept guessing about Jeremy's motivations, building suspense. But suspense is also created when it's told by an omniscient narrator because the reader knows Jeremy's motivations and is therefore worried about Tamsin. So consider the type of narration and the reliability of the narrator when you are making interpretations about characters based on their thoughts.